Just days after the United States captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a dramatic military operation, President Donald Trump has turned his sights on Colombia. In remarks aboard Air Force One on Sunday night, returning from Mar-a-Lago to Washington after what can only be described as the most significant U.S. military operation in Latin America since the 1989 invasion of Panama, Trump was asked about the possibility of conducting military operations against drug trafficking targets inside Colombia. His response sent shockwaves across the hemisphere. "Sounds good to me," Trump said. "You know why? Because they kill a lot of people." The words landed like a bombshell in Bogotá and in capitals across Latin America. For decades, Colombia has been one of America's closest allies in the region. The two countries have cooperated extensively on counter-narcotics operations, intelligence sharing, and military training. Now, that relationship appears to be on the verge of collapse. Trump's full remarks were extraordinary in their directness and their brutality. "We have a very sick neighbor," Trump said. "Not a neighbor, but close to a neighbor, and that is Venezuela, which is very sick." "Colombia is also very sick," he continued. "It is run by a sick man who likes to produce cocaine and sell it to the United States. And he's not going to keep doing it for much longer. Let me tell you." When pressed on what that meant, Trump doubled down. "It won't last long. He has cocaine factories. It won't last long." A reporter then asked the question that has now put Colombia on edge. "So there will be a U.S. operation in Colombia?" Trump's answer: "Sounds good to me." These are not the words of a diplomat engaging in careful statecraft. These are not the measured comments of a president weighing his options. These are the words of a president who has just demonstrated, with the capture of Maduro, that he is willing and able to use military force in Latin America whenever he chooses. And now Colombia, historically one of America's closest allies in the region, finds itself squarely in his crosshairs. The accusation that Petro personally likes to produce cocaine is without precedent in modern diplomatic discourse. No American president has ever publicly accused a sitting allied head of state of being a drug manufacturer. Colombian President Gustavo Petro responded Monday morning with a series of messages on social media that have stunned observers across the hemisphere. The former guerrilla fighter, who laid down his arms in 1989 as part of a peace agreement with the Colombian government, issued a warning unlike anything heard from a Latin American leader in decades. "Although I have not been a soldier, I know of war and clandestinity," Petro wrote. "I swore not to touch a weapon again since the Peace Pact of 1989. Then came the line that has reverberated across Latin America and the world. "But for the homeland, I will take up arms again. Arms I do not want." Let that sink in for a moment. The sitting president of Colombia, the country that has been the United States' closest ally in South America for decades, has just announced that he is prepared to take up arms against a potential American invasion. This is not political rhetoric. This is not diplomatic posturing. This is not a figure of speech. This is a former guerrilla commander, a man who spent years in armed struggle against the Colombian state, warning that he will return to armed resistance if his country is attacked. The implications are staggering. Petro was a member of the M19 guerrilla movement in his youth. He participated in armed operations. He lived underground. He evaded security forces. When he says he knows war and clandestinity, he is speaking from personal experience. Petro's response went even further. He issued a direct warning about what would happen if the United States attempts to do to him what it did to Maduro: capture and detain a sitting head of state. "If they detain the president that a good part of my people loves and respects," Petro wrote, "they will unleash the popular jaguar." The jaguar has become a recurring symbol in Petro's rhetoric, representing what he describes as the latent power of the Colombian people, ready to be awakened in defense of their sovereignty. It is a direct message to Washington. Do not try in Colombia what you just did in Venezuela. The consequences, Petro is warning, would be severe. The imagery is deliberate. The jaguar is a predator. It is patient. It waits in the shadows. But when it strikes with devastating force. That is the threat Petro is making. Whether it is a credible threat or merely bravado remains to be seen. Perhaps the most significant element of Petro's response was his direct order to Colombia's armed forces. As commander-in-chief of Colombia's military and police forces, Petro issued an ultimatum to his commanders. Every commander of the public force who prefers the flag of the United States to the flag of Colombia will be immediately removed from the institution, Petro declared. by order of the bases and the troops, and by my order. The Constitution orders the public force to defend popular sovereignty. This is an extraordinary moment in Colombian history. The president is demanding that his military choose sides. He is warning that any officer who shows loyalty to Washington over Bogotá will be purged from the ranks immediately. In any other context, this would be described as a president consolidating control over his military in preparation for potential conflict. The question now is whether Colombia's military brass will follow Petro, or whether they will look to Washington for guidance. Colombia's military has deep ties to the United States. For decades, Colombian officers have trained at American military schools. They have conducted joint operations with American forces. They have received American weapons, American funding, American intelligence. Will those ties hold? Or will the Colombian military stand with their president against the United States? That question may determine the fate of Colombia itself. In another statement, Petro issued a direct challenge to Trump. "Don't threaten me," Petro declared. "I'll wait for you here if you want. I don't accept invasions. I don't accept missiles. I don't accept assassinations. I accept intelligence." The message was unmistakable. Colombia will resist. But what does resistance actually look like against the most powerful military force in human history? The capture of Maduro demonstrated that the United States has the capability to strike anywhere in the hemisphere with precision, speed, and overwhelming force. American Special Operations Forces extracted a sitting head of state from his own capital in a matter of hours. If Washington decides to move against Petro, what could Colombia realistically do to stop it? That is the question hanging over Bogotá tonight. And it is a question to which there is no easy answer. In his social media responses, Petro forcefully rejected Trump's accusations that he is involved in drug trafficking. "It is not about whether Maduro is good or bad," Petro wrote, "not even whether he is a drug trafficker." In the files of Colombian justice, after half a century of dealing with the biggest cocaine mafias in the world, the names of Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores do not appear. Petro then turned the accusation directly back at Trump. "I deeply reject that Trump speaks without knowing my name," he wrote. "In 50 years, my name does not appear in judicial files on drug trafficking, neither from before nor from the present. Stop slandering me, Mr. Trump." Then came a pointed reminder of who Petro is and where he comes from. "This is not how you threaten a Latin American president who emerged from armed struggle, and later from the struggle for peace of the Colombian people." Petro was reminding Trump and the world that he is not a career politician who can be easily intimidated. He is a man who has faced death before. He is a man who has lived underground. He is a man who knows what it means to fight. And he is a man who is not afraid. Petro emphasized his personal integrity in the face of Trump's accusations. "I am not illegitimate, nor am I a narco," he wrote. "I only have as my possession my family home, which I still pay for with my salary. My bank statements have been published. No one could say that I have spent more than my salary. I am not greedy." For Petro, the contrast could not be clearer. He presents himself as a man of modest means, a public servant who lives on his salary, facing accusations from a billionaire American president. Whether the Colombian people accept that framing remains to be seen, but Petro is clearly attempting to draw a moral distinction between himself and Trump, between a man of the people and a man of wealth and privilege. It is a framing that resonates deeply in Latin America, where suspicion of American wealth and American power runs deep. Colombia's foreign ministry issued an official response to Trump's threats. In a formal communique, the ministry characterized Trump's warning about potential military operations as interference in Colombian affairs. The ministry invoked the principles of sovereignty, non-intervention, and mutual respect between nations. It reaffirmed that Petro's election as president was legitimate and based on constitutional norms, a direct response to any suggestion that Washington might try to delegitimize his government the way it has delegitimized Maduro's. The message from Bogotá was clear. Colombia will not accept threats from Washington, but diplomatic communiques are one thing. Resisting American military power is another matter entirely. Words on paper do not stop cruise missiles or special operations forces. Colombia knows this. The world knows this. The question is what comes next. To understand this crisis fully, we must understand the context in which it is unfolding. Colombia is in the grip of a security crisis unlike anything the country has experienced in recent memory. According to former President Álvaro Uribe Vélez, speaking at a forum of the Centro Democrático Party, the main opposition to Petro, more than 700 municipalities in Colombia are now under the control of criminal organizations. 700 municipalities. In these areas, the Colombian state has effectively ceased to function. Criminal groups control territory. They control economic activity. They control daily life. Political campaigns cannot operate in these municipalities. Candidates cannot campaign. Opposition figures cannot travel safely. Uribe and Paloma Valencia, who is the Centro Democrático's pre-candidate for the upcoming 2026 presidential elections, have denounced this situation repeatedly. They argue that under Petro's government, criminal organizations have dramatically expanded their territorial control across Colombia. This is the reality on the ground. A country where the state has lost control of vast swaths of its own territory. And this is the context in which Trump is threatening military action. Critics of Petro point to what they call the Pacoda Pact to explain the security crisis. La Pacoda is Colombia's main detention facility for high-profile criminals, drug traffickers, cartel leaders, paramilitary commanders. According to Petro's opponents, during the previous presidential campaign, Petro sent a message through his brother to prisoners at La Pacoda. The message allegedly offered benefits to imprisoned criminals if Petro won the election. Those benefits, critics say, have been delivered. Whether this constitutes a systematic plan by Petro to benefit criminal organizations, or simply reflects his ineffectiveness as a leader, is a matter of intense debate within Colombia. Some believe Petro has deliberately allowed criminal groups to flourish as part of a calculated political strategy. Others believe he is simply incompetent, lacking the discipline, focus, and capability to confront the security crisis effectively. The facts on the ground are undeniable. Colombia's security situation has deteriorated dramatically under Petro's watch. More than 700 municipalities under criminal control. Violence spreading, the state retreating. And now the United States is threatening military action. The irony is not lost on observers. Trump accuses Petro of being soft on drug trafficking, while Petro's domestic critics accuse him of the same thing. Petro has not been subtle about his ideological orientation throughout his presidency. He has repeatedly invoked the sword of Bolívar, a powerful symbol for the Latin American left. The sword represents revolutionary struggle against imperialism, against colonialism, against foreign domination. Simón Bolívar liberated much of South America from Spanish colonial rule in the early 19th century. His sword is a symbol of that liberation and of resistance to any foreign power that would seek to dominate the region. Petro has adopted the slogan, Patria o Muerte, homeland or death. This is the famous rallying cry of Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution. It is a phrase that carries enormous weight throughout Latin America. And now Petro has announced that he is prepared to take up arms again. For Petro's supporters, these are symbols of resistance against American imperialism, a defense of Latin American sovereignty and dignity in the face of Yankee aggression. For his critics, they are evidence that Petro remains, at his core, the guerrilla commander he was in his youth, a man willing to plunge Colombia into conflict rather than submit to pressure from any foreign power. The truth may lie somewhere in between. The timing of Trump's threats against Colombia is not coincidental. Just days ago, the United States executed what officials are calling the most significant military operation in Latin America since the invasion of Panama in 1989. American forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, at their home in Caracas. The operation was precise. It was coordinated. It was overwhelming. Within hours, Maduro, the man who had ruled Venezuela for more than a decade, was sitting in a detention center in Brooklyn, New York. The message to every leader in Latin America was unmistakable. The United States can reach you anywhere. The United States can remove you from power. The United States can bring you to face American justice. No border is safe. No palace is secure. No leader is untouchable. And now Trump is openly discussing doing the same thing in Colombia. For Latin American leaders watching from Mexico City, from Brasilia, from Buenos Aires, the message is clear. The rules have changed. In his remarks aboard Air Force One, Trump made clear that the Maduro operation may only be the beginning. He spoke of a Phase 2 that he is ready. Additional military operations that he hopes will not be necessary, but that he is prepared to execute if needed. Reports have emerged of regime forces, the colectivos loyal to figures like Diosdado Cabello, taking to the streets in Venezuela. There are reports of arrests. There are reports of repression. Human rights observers are warning that if the remaining Venezuelan leadership does not comply with American demands, Trump's Phase 2 could be unleashed. And now Colombia has been added to the target list. The question is no longer whether the United States will use military force in Latin America. The question is where and against whom it will strike next. Colombia now faces an impossible situation. On one side, the most powerful military force in human history, led by a president who has just demonstrated his willingness to use force in Latin America. On the other side, a president who is threatening to take up arms, a former guerrilla who knows war and clandestinity. What happens next? If Trump decides to launch operations against drug trafficking targets in Colombia, will Petro really resist? If American forces cross into Colombian territory, will Colombian troops fight back? If Petro is targeted the way Maduro was targeted, will the popular jaguar really be unleashed? These are questions that seemed unthinkable just weeks ago. Today, they are the questions that define the future of Colombia, and perhaps the future of all of Latin America. The situation in the Western Hemisphere is more volatile than it has been in decades. Venezuela's president sits in an American jail. Colombia's president is threatening armed resistance against the United States. Trump is openly discussing military operations across the region. The rules that have governed inter-American relations since the end of the Cold War appear to be collapsing. Sovereignty, non-intervention, respect for territorial integrity. These principles, enshrined in the UN Charter, in the OAS Charter, in decades of diplomatic practice, are being tested as never before. The world is watching. Latin America is watching. And the question everyone is asking is simple: who is next? In the face of this crisis, Petro has sent a message to the Colombian people. He has positioned himself as the defender of Colombian sovereignty, a president willing to fight, willing to take up arms again, willing to resist foreign aggression. Whether the Colombian people rally behind him remains to be seen. Petro is deeply polarizing. His approval ratings have fallen. His handling of the security crisis has been widely criticized. But in moments of external threat, nations sometimes unite behind their leaders, regardless of their domestic political differences. That is what Petro is counting on. That is the bet he is making. History will judge whether it was courage or recklessness. The coming days will be critical. Will Trump follow through on his threats? Will American forces conduct operations on Colombian soil? Will Petro make good on his warning to take up arms? Or will this crisis de-escalate, as so many crises before it have done, with harsh words giving way to quiet diplomacy? No one knows. What we do know is this: the relationship between the United States and Colombia, a relationship that has been central to American foreign policy in Latin America for decades, has been fundamentally altered. The trust that existed between Washington and Bogota has been shattered. And in its place, there is now suspicion, hostility, and the threat of conflict. At its core, this is a confrontation between a former guerrilla fighter and the world's only superpower. Gustavo Petro spent his youth in armed struggle. He knows what it means to fight against overwhelming odds. He knows what it means to live in clandestinity, to evade capture, to resist. Donald Trump commands the most powerful military force in human history. He has aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, special operations forces, satellite surveillance, and the ability to project power anywhere on Earth. If it comes to actual conflict, the outcome is not in doubt. But Petro is betting that it will not come to that. He is betting that his defiance, his willingness to threaten armed resistance, will deter Washington from acting. He is betting that the political costs of invading Colombia would be too high for even Trump to bear. Whether that bet pays off will determine the future of Colombia, and perhaps the future of an entire hemisphere. The world is watching, and the world is holding its breath.